Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. In this episode, I'm going to take a look at a prototype of Fuji Koro by Jérôme de Meijere, published by Game Brewer, which is currently on Kickstarter. And this is a hybrid between a Euro game where everybody's competing for victory points and a dungeon crawler, because you're fighting with samurai in the dungeons below Mount Fuji and you're trying to gather resources. You're trying to save ancient scrolls and monks from disaster because the Mount Fuji, the volcano, is almost going to erupt. And the shogun has sent out his best samurai to gather what they can before the mountain erupts, and to save the monks and to battle dragons that reside inside the volcano. So that sounds really interesting. I'll start with doing a setup of the game. I'll explain the rules, and after that I'll give you my final thoughts. You set up a competitive game of Fuji Koro like this. You take the board with the victory track side up, you put it in the middle of the table. Next you put together your 3 sacred temples and put them on the 3 indicated spots here on the board like so. Then you take the starting tile, which looks like this, and you put it in the middle of Mount Fuji. And there are also 3 of these bridge tiles, and you put them on the 3 indicated spots over there, there, and there. Next you take your Secret Scrolls deck and you shuffle that, and you put them on the indicated spot, turning over the first 3 cards in these spots over here. Next you take your gear cards, and there's gear cards with helmets, with weapons, and with sandals. You shuffle those individually, and according to the number of players you put out that many cards for each type. So in a 3-player game I would put out 3 helmets, I would put out 3 weapon gear cards, and 3 sandal cards, like so. And then you take your magical item cards, and there's also cards for sandals, weapons, and helmets. And according to the number of players, you pick that many cards, and you randomly put them on these temples. So in the case of a 3-player game, I would put 1 sandal here, here, and here. Then I take the helmet cards, shuffle that, and randomly take 1 helmet there, there, and there. And finally, these weapon cards, shuffle those and put 1 weapon on each temple. Now in a 4-player game, you'll have 4 of each type. In a 2-player game, you'll have 2 of each type, etc. And you just make sure they're evenly divided among the temples. You take the countdown token, which is a picture of Mount Fuji, and you put it in the first spot of the countdown track that you will be using at the end. And you have a dragon health marker that you put near the dragon health track over here, which keeps track of the dragon you are currently going to fight. Then you take your volcano tiles marked 1, 2, and 3. You shuffle those and place them next to the board, along with these lava tiles. You also place all these resource cubes. There are wood, iron, dragon teeth, and magical cubes next to the board. Then you take your resource tokens numbered 1, 2, and 3. They have resources on them, and you shuffle them in their own stacks. And if you're playing a 5- or 6-player game, you also take these 6-sided resource tokens. Otherwise, you only use the square resource tokens, and you put them next to the board. And you also put your brown, gray, white, and green dice, which are basically used for wood, iron, dragon teeth, and magical weapons. And you put them in easy reach as well. And finally, you collect all of these tokens. There are monk tokens, there are sacred scroll tokens for all the players, and there are magical scroll tokens as well for the helmets, weapons, and sandals. There is a rope token that will come into play at the end, and there's a first player token and the volcano token when you reach the final phase of the game, and you just put that near the board as well. And then each player picks a color of their choice and the corresponding player board. There's 6 of these. In this prototype version, we only have the versions that are similar to each other than the artwork. The final version might even have an asymmetrical version where you have double-sided boards and the other side will have player boards with different kinds of abilities, making the game asymmetrical. So you take your player board, your player token, your victory point score marker, and you take 3 of these action tokens and you put them in the appropriate spots over there that you can use for indicating which action you took. In a 1, 2, or 3 player game, that's it, you don't get any monks, but in a 4 or 5 player game, each player receives 1 monk, and you can place them in any of these spots, unlocking something extra. So in this case, you get an extra action. In this case, you get an extra sacred scroll slot. Here you get an extra backpack, so you can store more materials. Or you can slot it over here, unlocking the ability to wield a second one-handed weapon or one big two-handed weapon, which I will explain later. And then in a 6-player game, all players get 2 monks, so you can immediately unlock 2 of those things. And each player also receives 2 wooden cubes and 2 metal cubes, and these are used to forge your starting weapon. So basically the wood indicates your hilt and the metal is the blade of the weapon. So you just make a simple weapon. You can make it any way you want to technically, and I'll explain a bit more about that later. Lastly, every player puts their player standee or miniature, if you have the deluxe version, on the starting tile. You put your colored marker at the victory track at spot 0. And finally, you have all of these dragons, either standees or miniatures in the deluxe version, and you put them near the board as well, along with their dragon tiles that will indicate how strong they are. And now you are ready to play a competitive version of Fujikoro. The setup for a cooperative game is exactly the same as the competitive version. You have your temples, your magic scrolls, your sacred scrolls, your gear scrolls, your bridge tiles, the starting tile. You put your players on that starting tile. You don't have a victory track, of course, because you're playing cooperatively. You have these dragon tiles that have a blue and a red side, which is a sleeping and an awake dragon, and some dragon damage tokens. Now, the rules in this prototype that I have did not really involve those tokens, so I'm not sure if they'll be in the final version. But these are to indicate whenever you find a dragon, then it's first asleep, the next round it wakes up, and the round after that it will start moving. So that is basically all that's different in the cooperative version. You also have this round track here, which works slightly different. You have a set amount of rounds that you play with everybody until you reach the final 8 rounds where the lava will begin to rise. So you simply just track your rounds with this marker, and then at the end you have several rounds where the lava will start to rise, and then the game ends. So that's the setup. Let's explain the rules. Okay, so in Fujikoro, you're all samurai trying to gather as much as resources and items as you can within Mount Fuji before it erupts. You also battle dragons, and then you try to escape, bringing as much valuable items to the Shogun's palace in order to receive more victory points, because the player with the most victory points, of course, wins the game. You have only a set amount of time for that. Once one player reaches 30 victory points, then the final 8 rounds will begin, and you only have 8 of those rounds before the game ends, so you try to escape as fast as possible to try and score as many points as you still can. So, how does that work? On a player's turn, you will have several actions that you can choose from. You've got 4 actions, which are exploring, moving, gathering, and resting, which also means you can craft. I'll explain all of those in a bit. So first of all, you can explore, which means you take a tile. You first indicate which side of the tile that you are on you are going to explore. So starting from this starting tile, you've got 6 level 1 tiles to explore. So you indicate where you're going to explore. So for example, I'm going to explore over here. You pick the top tile from the stack with the level 1 on it. You flip it around and you check to see what's on it, and then you can orient it in any way you want and put that on the table, and they connect really nicely like this. Then you check what's on that tile and you put those these tokens on it. So in this case, in a 3-player game, we have the square resource token. So we take a level 1 square resource token and I put it on that space. And that tells me there's 2 wooden and 1 iron material to get here. In a 6 or 5-player game, I can also use these tokens. So then I would put a level 1 hexagonal resource token on that spot as well, which can have materials or monks in this case. But since we're playing a 3-player game, those tokens are not in place, so I simply ignore that. And then these player colors are basically your sacred scrolls, and you put a token of the indicated color on that tile like so, and that means that players of that color, so the pink player in this case, or the blue player, and you can also find colors of players that are currently not playing, so you simply ignore those, but you could move there and then spend a gathering action to pick that up, which means you can gather one of those sacred scrolls. Now I'll touch on that a bit later. So you explore, and then basically for a level 1 tile you don't get any victory points. So you have 6 of those. Then surrounding those 6 there are 12 spots for level 2 tiles, and they score you 1 victory point when you explore. So again, if I was standing over here, for example, I could say, okay, in the next circle around these 6, I'm going to explore over here because I'm trying to get to the temple perhaps. So I get a victory point right away like that. I flip it around and then I check how I want to orient it and just place it on the tile like that. So for example, I want to put it, let me see, like this, and I can place it there. Now in this case, this tile has a monk and a red dragon, because the further out you go, the more dangerous the dragons can be that you encounter. Not all tiles have to have dragons, of course. And then I take a monk token and I put it in this spot. That's a monk that wants to be rescued. And I take a red dragon token, so there's several of those, and you randomly pick one, you flip it over, and it has a slot that you can slot into the base of the miniature, or otherwise you can simply take the standee with the same letter on it. In this case it's A, so it's Abe the dragon, and you put it on here. And this indicates the initiative value and the health that it has. I'll explain that later as well. So basically that's how you explore, and you can gain no 1 or 2 victory points by exploring the level 1, 2 or 3 tiles. So there's connected to these level 2 tiles, there's 12 spots for level 3 tiles as well. And in that same circle, there are also the 3 temples and the 3 bridges. So that all connects, and your map will expand and expand further. And you will notice that there is also lava here. So you can't just walk over lava. For that you need protection as well, and you need sandals for those. And every time you would walk over a tile that has lava, you get 5 damage, as is indicated on this icon here. You can see someone hopping over lava, taking 5 damage, which would do 5 damage to your sandals. So you need to have sandals that can absorb that damage, because a samurai would otherwise just die, and they don't commit suicide in this game. So that's basically the tiles. There's also spots that have numbers on them, as you can see here. That's only for the final 8 rounds. When this starts moving after every player takes a turn, that means that when you're here at the 1, then all the tiles that have a space with a 1 on it will receive one of those lava tiles, indicating that that has flooded with lava. So that makes it more dangerous and more hard to escape Mount Fuji. So that goes up, and then every time, here's the number 2, that one would get flooded, and then over here with the 5, that one would get flooded. So it gets worse and worse the longer you stay in the volcano. Okay, that is exploring. Then there's a second action that's moving. Now each samurai can move up to 3 spaces. You cannot break up that move action, so you can't move 2 spaces, gather something, and move your remaining movement points. You have to do that in one go. So you can move up to 3 spaces. These are all spaces. And if you're playing cooperatively, the dragons will not stay on their tile. They will also start chasing you at a certain point. And these move entire tiles. So they don't need to move single spaces. And they also ignore lava. So they can stand anywhere on a tile. And they move 1 tile at a turn. The third action you can do is to gather. That means whenever I am on a tile that has these cube symbols on it, like this one, or in the case of the starting tile, there's also some resources here, and the temples also have resources. So the starting tile and temples have 1 iron and 1 wooden cube, and these tiles that you randomly draw and put on these indicated spots will have several different ones. They can have 2 or 3 of these cubes. So if I'm on one of those spots, I can use my gather action, and that means I gain 2 wooden cubes and 1 iron cube, and I put that on my board in my inventory in my backpack. Alright, and then I flip this over, indicating that I used that resource, but it stays on the table because whenever I explore another tile, so let's say I'm exploring this tile, or another player is exploring that tile, putting it down like this. So the green player might do that in his turn, for example. So you connect those. Then all the adjacent tiles, next to the just explored tile, will refresh. So that means that all the resources that have been gathered already flip around again to be available to harvest once more. And that happens every time. So if I explore here, then this would reset again until it's completely surrounded and used, and then it won't reset anymore. So there's several times that you can actually gather from these tiles if you place new ones next to them. So this one again has some sacred scrolls for a certain player, and you can only pick up your own sacred scrolls. So that is also a gather action. So if I'm on this spot, on one of those tokens in my own color, then I can use a gather action to pick up that token, and I will put that in my backpack as well. And I'll show that to you just to let you see how that works. So you've got your player board, and every time you take an action, you put one of those action tokens on the appropriate spot. Now you can only do you do have 2 actions, but you have to do 2 different actions on your turn. So I could, I could walk and gather, for example. But on my next turn, I could, of course, walk again or gather again. You just can't do 2 of the same actions in one turn. So when I do that, I place I maybe have some resources from last time. I had an iron and 2 wood, for example. Those go into my backpack on these spaces. And whenever I pick up a magic scroll, then I put it in here as well. So that also takes up a slot in my backpack. But then I get to pick one of these magical scrolls or the top one of the deck if that's not what I want. So for example, I will take this tile and this card, and all of these cards have different abilities which are explained on the back of the rule book as well. So for example, this one tells me that I've got, whenever I move, I can move over lava without taking damage once. So instead of taking the indicated 5 damage, I could just skip over that. So I put that on my scroll slot like this, and I score 3 victory points as indicated on the scroll. That only happens once, and you never lose it. So if for some reason I lose this card, I still get to keep those 3 victory points. So the pink player gets 3 victory points, and you just move your marker on the score track over there. So this fills up, and then a fourth action that I can take on my turn is to rest. So if I have already spent some of my actions and I don't have anything to do anymore, maybe I've got a monk and I've got a fourth action, then I can use one of those actions. It's basically also an action, but you just take back all of your action tokens when you rest. You put them back in their slots. And during my rest, when I regain all of those tokens, I can craft. So when I'm resting, I can take all the cubes that are at my, in my backpack, and I can put them either in the helmet spot, or my weapon spot, or my sandals spot. Now they all have a certain number of slots available. So I could use these that I gathered to craft a helmet, for example, and I can make them however I want. I just like making them symmetrical, but you don't really need to. That means that I will have some protection when doing battle, which I will also explain later. But I can also use it to make my weapon bigger. Now, when I only have this spot unlocked, so say I don't have that monk, then I can only use these 5 by 5 squares. But had I put my starting monk on this one, if I had one, or maybe I found one and gathered him, then I can unlock this spot and I can make my weapon bigger. Then I can either make two one-handed weapons, so for example something like this, or I can combine them to make one huge two-handed weapon, and then I can cross over. And this is 7 cubes right now, and I can go up to 8. There is a limit to there's some rules here. This says a one-handed weapon can be a maximum size of 8 and a maximum width of 5, because then it will, pass the boundaries of that spot. And it needs a minimum of 2 wood, which is basically your hilt. You need to grip your weapon somewhere. And they don't have to be next to each other, by the way. They can be just anywhere, but it just needs 2 wooden pieces. When you're building a two-handed weapon, you can have a maximum number of 12 cubes with a minimum of 3 wood, because a two-handed weapon requires 2 hands. You need a bigger hilt. And again, those can be anywhere on the weapon. So I can, just craft with my cubes a weapon in any shape that I want, but remember the length of my weapon. So, in this case, the horizontal length in the one-handed variant is a maximum of 5, in the two-handed is a maximum of 8. That indicates your initiative. So when you're battling other samurai or dragons, you compare initiative, and the person with the highest initiative, or the longest weapon, starts the battle. And the cubes have different values as well. It's also indicated on your player board. Wood is basically 1 point. In your helmet, that means 1 point of protection. Same in your sandals. And here it means basically your die strength. So you have a different dice, and the brown die is for your wooden cubes. So basically, you roll as many cubes as you have. You roll as many dice as you have cubes here in your weapon. And of course, the brown ones are the weakest. The iron ones are stronger. Then there's also dragon teeth, which are white cubes that you can win for battling dragons or defeating dragons. And they are even stronger. And lastly, you can craft a magical weapon, but you need the blueprints for that, which are in the temples. And once you manage to craft a magical weapon, you also get a green token, which you simply put on top of your weapon somewhere, anywhere you want. And that gains you the green die, which is the strongest die, does the most damage. Okay, so that's basically really quickly how that works, and I'll explain how battle goes in a bit. So you can craft weapons. So that's crafting, and whenever I craft something that matches one of those gear cards, that means I can pick up that gear card and use it. So if I manage to build, for example, let's say I've built a helmet. So let's say I've used those cubes that I gathered, still have my starting weapon, and I've used them to build a helmet. Then I check this chart over here. Do I have a card that matches this? Yes, then I would have had to build it like this, technically. So I could do that during my resting phase when I'm crafting, and I match this card. So that means that I can choose to pick up that card from the board, and then I slot it in one of these 3 action spaces. So, and that will give me a permanent bonus. This one says plus a wooden cube. So that would mean every time I do that action, I get a wooden cube. So I could do that when I walk. So that would mean every time I take the movement action, I also gain a wooden cube. I can also put it in my gathering to gather just, a bit extra whenever I gather. You can put it anywhere you want. And once it's there, it stays there. Even if your helmet breaks down or you change it completely, it doesn't matter anymore. This is slotted in here permanently for the rest of the game. So that's also a nice bonus. And we've already discussed these magical scrolls, which give you a permanent bonus as well, as long as you keep these cards. And whenever you pick one there, you refresh it with a new one from the stack, of course. So, and then another player can have a chance of getting that. And once you unlock this space with a monk, you can actually have a second scroll giving you 2 advantages for the entire game. So back to crafting a bit more. So obviously I only have in my helmet these 8 spots, so I can have more than 8 spots, except for when it's magical. I just put the green magical cube on top. I don't need to have actually a slot for that. Same goes for my sandals. When I build sandals, I only have 3 spots. And this, for example, is a sandal that's 1 plus 2 plus 1, so it has 4 strength. So it's actually not very useful because I cannot walk over lava with that, because lava damages my sandals for 5 points, and this is 4 points. So if I want to make useful sandals, I need to have at least 5 points worth of materials in them. So that's basically what they do, although I can build sandals that basically look like this in this example, and I would have matched this card. So if I had not taken the helmet, I could have taken this card. Now, all the helmets give you an extra resource. All the sandal gear cards give you an extra movement, so I can put that anywhere. So for example, I can put that underneath my explore action, so that every time I'm at the edge of a tile and I explore the next tile, I can use that extra action to actually move onto that tile right away, which is also very handy. Or I can slot it under my movement to move 4 steps instead of 3, or I can use it after my gathering action. So that's also something I could have done. And then finally there's the weapons. So once I manage to build a weapon that matches one of these cards, I get an extra victory point on an action. That is also very handy. That you can also put whenever you explore or whenever you move. And this is actually pretty powerful to get a victory point whenever you move. So that's something I always like to do. Okay, so those are the 3 gear cards that you can get by crafting something that matches those cards. The magical blueprints basically work the same. Now all the magical blueprint cards in the temples over here, you can just slot them inside the roof there, are open information. So anyone can look at them anytime. You could just put them on the table next to the temples if that's easier. And you can look at them anytime, and they also have blueprints for building helmets, sandals, and weapons. And once you enter a temple, which is basically just one spot, one space, just like the starting tile. So you can go in there once you've connected a pathway there, and say my samurai is in that temple with these cards. Then I can pick up, then you use a gather action, and pick up 1 or 2 cards. I can actually just grab 2 cards if I think I can build them. And then I slot them in the appropriate space. Now you can only have 1 magical helmet blueprint, 1 magical sword blueprint, and 1 magical sandal blueprint. So once I have those, I take the matching, so let's say I took the helmet card, I take the matching blueprint token. I also put that in my backpack because I'm carrying that blueprint around, and I just keep that next to my player board until I manage to build a helmet that matches this description, and then I get the green cube. So that's when that happens basically. And it stays magical as long as I have the matching configuration of that card. Whenever my helmet or my weapon or my sandals would get damaged, and it doesn't match the description anymore, the blueprint, then I lose that token. Now that token, as you know, is 4 power or 4 strength, 4 armor. So that would absorb 4 points of damage. So let's say I've got them on these sandals. Let's say I've got sandals that look like this. I don't know if there's a card that actually looks like that. Magical, probably not, but let's just say for argument's sake I have magical sandals and I walk over lava. That deals 5 points. Now this will absorb 4 points of damage, which is good. It goes away, and 1 damage does destroy one of these wood tokens. So now my sandals are incomplete and it's not magical anymore. If on a next turn or next action I craft and I build my weapon back up to the same specs again, it will instantly become magical again as long as I have that blueprint. If somebody else stole that blueprint from me, then they will stay magical for as long as they're not damaged and they're the same configuration. But once that card is gone and I damage my sandals or whatever I built that is magical, then and I lose the cube, I don't even need to know if this matches the original blueprint because I don't have it anymore. If they get damaged, it's no longer magical. So hang on to those scrolls because they will also be valuable in the end for scoring points at the Shogun's castle. Crafting is one of the coolest mechanics in this game, and I can craft anything I want as long as it answers to the rules. So once I've managed to pick up a magical scroll, I've gathered a scroll from a temple, I get the magical scroll icon. I need to get a weapon icon because this is a weapon, and that's in my backpack, and I get the scroll, and if I manage to craft a weapon that resembles the blueprint, then I get the magical cube as well, and I can just put it on top of my weapon anywhere, it doesn't really matter. So I have a magical weapon now that gives me 4 extra points of damage. Basically I get the green die added to my damage roll. And in the case of the helmet and the sandals, it absorbs 4 damage. But a weapon also gets me +5 initiative. So if my weapon is 8 cubes long, which is the maximum that will fit in my slot here, then I've got 8 initiative +5. So that's 13 initiative, which is pretty high and good for fighting dragons. Now, when I fight, then I take an amount of dice equal to the cubes in my weapon, and when you've got a big weapon and a magical weapon, that's quite a lot, so that's a lot of fun to do. So you roll your dice and you check your roll, and I rolled pretty badly actually. I got low scores, but that's the damage you do to your opponents or your dragon. But all these dice except the green one also have a breakage side, so it is always the high amount of damage except for the wooden one, which only has 1 point of damage on all the sides. And these white ones are dragon's teeth. They also have breakage. Whenever I roll those, that means I have to take away that color from my weapon. So if I only rolled 1 of each, then I have to take away a wooden cube, and it no longer matches the description, so the green one goes away as well. I need to take away a white one and an iron one. So those broke. So I'm left with that weapon, and I have to be careful how I do that because it still has to answer to these rules, otherwise I can't use my weapon anymore. Now I can have an incomplete weapon in my inventory, but if I want to use it, it needs to be an actual weapon. Now in this case it's still a two-handed weapon. I've got my two-handed slot unlocked, of course. It is a maximum of 12, it's only 7, so that's good, and it has a minimum of 3 wood, which is also the case. So I can still use this, and hopefully if I win the battle, then I can craft it later back into its original shape. Although if I lost these, I'd need to get a white dragon's tooth cube again. So maybe I was fighting a dragon, and if I defeated it, then defeating a dragon always gets you a dragon's tooth. And dragons fight only with white dice, and that's indicated on the board how much they fight with. A blue dragon fights with 3 white dice, a green one with 4, a red one with 5, and the legendary white dragon fights with 6 white dice. And they have lots of damage, but they also have blind sides, blank ones, so you could be lucky. But they also sometimes break something, and when a dragon rolls this, that means they break off a tooth attacking you, and they drop one of these. And if you win the battle, you can pick that up and get an extra, or maybe even more extra teeth in your inventory, as long as you can fit them. Now, whenever you pick up a resource that's maybe better than another one, I can actually exchange them. So I can drop one of these in favor of something else when I gather or after battling a dragon. So if I was successful in battling a dragon, I picked up some dragon's teeth, and maybe I still had some resources from earlier, then I can take a rest action on my next, my next action, could be the same turn, and I can just, try to fix my weapon again. So I can use all of those cubes in my backpack and see if I can, forge back the weapon the way it was, and I can, so I get that magical green cube again, so I can just put that on top once more. Plus, if I have some other cubes left, maybe I got lucky and get some extra dragon's teeth, and maybe I still had some resources, I can still add that as long as my maximum is 12. So I've got 8, 9, 10, 11, and this one doesn't count, I think, so it needs to be 12 on the board, so I can actually use another one. So I can build this uber powerful whatever it is. Doesn't really matter as long as it matches the blueprint you have if you want it to be magical, and otherwise you can just expand however you want, and up till a maximum of 12 for a two-handed weapon and 8 for a one-handed weapon. So that means the next time I use this, I've got more dice to roll, doing more damage, but also potentially having more chance of breakage. So here on the board you can see the amount of dice that these dragons roll and the amount of victory points you get when you defeat them. So the blue ones get you 5, the green ones 7, the red ones 10, and the legendary white one gets you 15 victory points. But they are so strong that you're gonna need to fight it with multiple characters, because you can fight together, and their tiles will show you how much health they have and how much initiative they have. So the blue ones have very low initiative and low health. The green ones are a bit stronger. The red ones are pretty tough, and you might want to tackle them with 2 or more samurai as well. And the white one, you really need to work together to defeat it, or it will eat you alive. So when you defeat it, you get victory points and 1 dragon tooth. And if you're fighting with multiple samurai together, you all get that reward. You don't split it up, you just all get the same reward. So how can you fight together? Whenever a player explores a tile that has a dragon and decides to enter it, he will enter that tile on a safe spot, and then battle will commence. So you check your weapon, you roll your dice, you check your initiative, you see who rolls first, and you attack. But if there are other people on an adjacent tile, so for example this tile over here, and they are on an adjacent spot, so either here or here, which are safe spots, they could enter battle on your tile and help you. Now this is a pretty difficult tile to step on because it has lots of lava, but so this spot could have a maximum of 2 samurai. So this person could step into this spot safely and assist in battling the red dragon. This person is also on an adjacent spot, but he can't go in here because then he would enter lava, and that would damage him and kill him if he doesn't have sandals. And even if he did, he can't stop on a space that has lava. And this spot is already taken because there's 2 samurai on it, which is the maximum any spot can have. So in this case, with the much lava surrounding the dragon, there's a maximum of 2 that can battle. But say if the dragon was over here, and I had a player standing there and a player who had entered, and there was a player over here, then this person could, if you can see that, this person could join that samurai on this tile, on that spot together, and this samurai could also just enter that same tile, and they could battle the dragon together, all 3 of them. So that's how that works. And then you check initiative, like I said, and the dragon or player with the highest initiative starts battle. The combatant, so either the dragon or the samurai with the highest initiative, gets to go first and roll their dice. And then the second highest initiative goes second, and so on. And the defender always wins a tie. So if in a competitive game, it's always the dragon who's the defending player, the defending character. So they always go first in a tie for initiative. In the cooperative mode, the dragon chases the players, and the player could be the defending player. So the defender wins initiative ties. In case of a tie between samurai during dragon combat, then the turn order decides, basically starting with the active player and then going clockwise. And this turn order stays the same during the entire combat. So when a player breaks their weapon and it's no longer usable as an actual weapon, then they may decide to retreat from the combat, only then, immediately after their dice roll. So then they move their samurai back to the space where they came from, outside of that combat tile, and they will no longer be involved in the combat. So when the dragon is defeated, they will not share the rewards. If you are fighting with two one-handed weapons, then you should roll once per weapon, one right after the other. Don't roll them together because you need to decide for breakage which weapon actually breaks. If a samurai takes damage from a dragon, they remove that much damage from their helmet to absorb the damage. And if you're not able to remove enough cubes, so when the helmet is entirely gone, then you are knocked unconscious and your samurai will be put on its side. He will be pushed back one space out of the combat zone, and they will not get any rewards, and they end their turn. And on the next turn, you simply set them back up again and they can continue playing. So they don't die in the competitive mode. In the cooperative mode, every samurai only has 2 lives. So you can die once, but the second time a samurai dies, then everybody loses the game. If a dragon is not defeated during the combat phase and all the samurai are defeated and knocked out, then the dragon will regain its full health the next time you battle it. So you need to kill it in one go. There is a way that you can gain initiative even if your initiative is lower than the dragon, and that is by using a heroic monk. At the beginning of combat, you may send one of your monks from your player board to the dragon to distract it. That means you have to remove it from your player board, locking that ability again, so be careful what you choose. And then that monk will take 1 resource token from your backpack, so you need to have that available, and he throws it towards the dragon. If you don't have any available, he simply throws a rock or something. So that means if you have something in your backpack, the monk takes 1 cube, and he distracts the dragon and then runs away. So the monk is gone, but the dragon will be distracted enough that he will not have initiative, and then you as a player can start battling it, which is a big advantage. Now you can also combat other samurai in the competitive mode. If you do that, if you move onto the same space as another samurai, then combat may occur. You need to decide if you want to combat, and if both players decide not to combat, then gameplay continues as normal, and the movement action of the active player may then continue. And if one of both players at least decides to combat, then the movement action of the active player ends, and you start combat. If you begin your turn on the same space as another samurai, no combat is started automatically, but you may decide to move out of the space and immediately back in order to initiate combat. Combat between 2 players cannot be joined by other players, and initiative is determined according to the length of their weapons, so that's the same as always. You cannot use heroic monks in samurai combat, and it's basically resolved the same way as dragon combat. Also here, when a player hasn't got a weapon left to combat with, then they may decide to stop the combat and surrender. And if no one surrenders, the combat continues until someone gets 1 more hit point than their helmet can take, and that player is then defeated. The defeated samurai is knocked unconscious, is placed on its side on an adjacent space without lava, and the opponent can choose where that is. And if that was their turn ends, and an unconscious samurai cannot be attacked. If you surrender or if you are defeated, your opponent may steal one item from your backpack, which can be a magical blueprint token and its matching card. And when that happens, your weapon, if it's still magical, will stay magical, like I said earlier, until it's broken in some way and you can't fix it anymore because you don't have the blueprints anymore. They can also steal a monk only from your backpack, because yes, you can store monks in your backpack if all those slots are already taken. And you can also steal a sacred scroll with its matching card. And if you have two of them, because you unlocked the second slot, then your opponent may choose which one to take. And they will get the 3 victory points that come with that card, but you don't lose them. They can also take a resource cube from your backpack. There is also a peaceful variant of the competitive game where you simply decide never to battle between samurai. And when I escape the Mount Fuji, the volcano at the end of the game, then I can take those magical weapons with the blueprint. I need to have an intact magical weapon on my player board plus the blueprint, and I can take it to the Shogun's castle. So whenever somebody escapes from the volcano, you immediately, if you escape through the starting tile over there, and then you go to the Shogun's big castle over here, and the first player to get there can put one item of their choice on these scoring tracks. So if I have a magical helmet, I can put the blueprints for that magical helmet from my backpack over here on the 10 victory points. The second player will get 8, then there's 6, 5, 4, and 3 points. So getting out of the volcano quickly is very good for getting points if you have magical items. So the same is for the sandals and for the weapons. So the first person to place an item there gets 10, then 8, 6, 5, 4, and 3 victory points, and you can only put one item down on your turn. So once everybody starts going out, you still continue taking turns, and one by one people can put stuff here. You also get points for monks, so the first player will get 7, the second 5, then 3, 2, and then there's 1 point for the fifth and following, so this one means that it repeats if you get that far. And this is a dragon tooth cube, so you get 1 victory point for each dragon tooth that you put here as well. So the same, that's basically the big Shogun castle when you get out of the main exit, but there is also a hidden exit. The secret exit is hidden on a tile that is a level 2 tile, and it has this rope icon on it. So the rope icon indicates that you can exit, and the same icon you can see on the track over here in the bottom. So once this end round, these final 8 rounds, once this tracker gets over here, then the starting tile will also get this rope tile on it, which means you can no longer gather on the tile because this covers up the gathering icon, and it indicates that you can escape through the starting tile, or you can escape through this hidden exit, this secret entrance, this tunnel. And that means you don't go to the big palace, but to the small palace. So the small palace will only get the first person that puts one of these magical items or a monk there 5 victory points. So it's a lot less points to get there, so it's more beneficial to escape through the main starting tile, the main exit. But you know, if you're short on time and you can't reach the exit anymore, then this might be another solution, and you would certainly get 5 victory points, maybe even more if nobody follows you there. So that is the second palace, and the second way that you can get victory points by giving the Shogun these magical items and saving the monks. This one does not have dragon's teeth though. So those are basically all the rules for Fuji Koro. Let's go to my final thoughts. Okay, so my final thoughts on Fujikoro by Jérôme de Meyre, published by Game Brewer. Well, I can say there is a lot to like about this game. Let me start with the artwork. I mean, the artwork is brilliant. I love the artwork. I love the kind of pixel art style that this game tries to convey, it is just beautiful. I mean, the board is gorgeous, and this is, of course, the deluxe version. The retail version won't have this board. It'll have a simpler sideboard with just the dragon health tracker, with the victory point tracker, with the big and the small palaces on it. So you've got your, your references. You can keep score, and the rest is just put on the table. So you've got your tiles are on the table, your cards are on the table. So this is really, the deluxe version is really a step up from the retail version because this board is gorgeous. And there will also be a vinyl playmat with stitch edges that has the same art. It's also going to be double-sided. But, if you're thinking, I might pick up the retail version and then the vinyl mat later if it's still available, then actually backing the game on Kickstarter now for the deluxe version will be cheaper. So if you're on the fence about that, I really go for the deluxe version because it just looks so good. I mean, this board is gorgeous, and all the tiles on it make it look so cool. It really looks like you're, exploring this lava dungeon with your guys, your samurai, and you're exploring and you're finding all these items, these tokens. You can get resources, and the crafting system is so fantastic. So okay, for the artwork is fantastic. I also love that it has this actual 3D temples on it. That looks just so cool. And the deluxe version will have actual 3D miniatures for the dragons and the samurai instead of standees. So that is also a plus, at least for me. Not everybody likes miniatures, but they do block your view less because these are pretty big. And when they were on the board, when I played this, they were like, okay, what's over there? Can I see what's behind this dragon? And it kind of clutters. And I think miniatures might have less. It will still block view with the bigger ones, of course, but I think that's just really something that's going to look a lot better on the table. The boards are good. I like the fact that these boards, they're nice and big. They have slots for all your cards. They're clear. The icons are clear. The game is actually fully language independent, so you're going to know what all these icons do. After just having read the rules or having them explained to you. They're very clear, and there's no mistake at what happens with all your actions and all your slots. So that's really cool. And if it has a asymmetrical version in the final version of the game, that's even better because then you'll have more options to play. The tokens will be wooden discs with heat transferred graphics on them, so that will also look a lot better than the chips that I have now. Obviously the cubes will still be cubes because you're using them to craft, and I love that crafting system. This is such a unique way of building your weapon. You're gathering resources, we've all done that before, and then you can just, while you rest, you can build something. You can actually move your cubes around and make a helmet or sandals or the coolest, the weapon. That is just so much fun. And you can have two one-handed weapons that fit in their respective squares, or you can have one massive two-handed weapon that can fit the entire square put together with a maximum of 12 cubes, of course. But still, that's just so much fun. And then you just battle with the dice. That's really simple. You get this many cubes on your weapon, that's the dice you roll. If you break something, you take a cube away of that color. And it's easy as that, and that just works really nicely. And I like the battle system. I like the fact that you're battling dragons. That's just pretty cool. And you can also choose to battle each other should you want to, although the only thing you will gain from that is possibly something that person is carrying if you really need that. But it can come at a cost. You could lose and then lose your weapon and spend your turn doing basically nothing, and you'll have to get your helmet back in order again. You might have broken your weapon. So technically, I found when playing competitively that the peaceful variant is the preferred variant because there's not a whole lot of incentive to really attack each other. You're gonna want to go for those dragons anyway because they give you the most victory points. So I really like all that. There's exploring, there's resource management, there's crafting in a really unique way, there's battling, there's just the cards. There's so much cool mechanics in this game, and they work so well together. And like I said, the artwork is cool. The 3D temples are cool. There's just a whole lot of eye candy here, and in a massive, massive box. And I really love that. There's just one thing that I want to talk about was about the cooperative play. We found in the rules currently, as they are on the Kickstarter page, that when you play a cooperative game in the normal mode and you have to, together the whole party has to craft one magical item of each, so that's 3 magical items, and you're playing, say, with 6 players. It says 2 to 6 players have 15 rounds plus the 8 final rounds when the lava starts to rise. And in those rounds, you have to craft those 3 items, you have to find and slay the legendary white dragon, and you have to find the hidden exit and exit through that. And if one of you dies, then you lose the game. So I thought, well, if that rule is the same for 2 to 6 players, aren't you going to have a big advantage when you're playing with 6 players or 5? Because you'll have a lot more actions before the dragons go. Because you play a full round, then the dragons go, then a full round again, then the dragons go. So if you're with 6 or 5 players, you're going to have a lot more chances to do stuff. And you can also hand over your resources when you're in the same spot. So if you're in the same space with another player like this, then you can just trade stuff or give stuff. And then you could potentially, with 6 players, you could say, okay, we're going to make 2 or 3 samurai incredibly buffy. We're going to give them all the stuff. The other 3 will explore and gather stuff, and then we'll just bring it to the others who will also be exploring, gathering, but they will be focusing on getting to the temples, getting those blueprints, building those weapons to fight the dragons. And the others will just be backup, and they will be finding the exit in the meantime, or the white dragon. While when you're playing this with 2 players, you have the same amount of rounds, but a lot less actions. So that was a kind of a strange thing for me to read that. And I was like, just from reading it, I felt, well, this is not balanced. So I'm pretty sure they've play tested this, and either I did something wrong, or the rules on the Kickstarter that I downloaded were already, old and not up to date, and they've been working on that. So I hope that they've fixed the balance of the multiplayer, because to me it would be more logical that with a 6-player game you'd have less rounds than with a 2-player game you had a lot more rounds. That would make sense to me, but okay. And then there's the epic mode where everybody has to craft all 3, so that's pretty tough. But it is fun. It's just a lot of fun to play. So, well, that's basically it. I really, really love this game. I'm giving it a huge 2 thumbs up. And this is actually, because it's technically a hybrid between a Euro game and a thematic dungeon exploring game, which I love. And I'm not that big of a Euro gamer. I usually like the bigger thematic games or the smaller filler, casual Euro games. I love games like, King of Tokyo and Celestia. I really push your luck games. And I like, well, lots of stuff. But, the really heavy ones, they usually, I get bored. But this is a perfect hybrid between the two. And the last time I had a game that was technically a Euro game, disguised as an Ameritrash game, was Adrenaline. And I really love Adrenaline. I just loved the theme. I love the fact that you're basically playing a first-person shooter, but everything, all the mechanics in that game was technically a Euro game. And this is really the first time since that game that I've really liked a game like that so much. And this is different. This is really a perfect hybrid. This is just a Euro game disguised as a dungeon crawler, because you're actually exploring and you're fighting and there's dice in the combat. So it's as much a thematic dungeon crawler as it is a Euro game where you're gathering victory points. Plus the fact that you can play cooperatively is really cool as well. So I'm really excited about this game, and this is currently in 2019 in my top 5, maybe even my #1 game. So everything that will be released in the rest of this year will really have to be quite good to match this. I can just really say I really love this game. The only points that, like I said, I hope they fix is the multiplayer, a cooperative version where it doesn't really scale well when you're playing 2 or 6 players. Otherwise, that's it. I mean, there is some frustration when you've built a big weapon and you're rolling all of those dice. There's just a handful of dice, and that's a lot of fun. But you get more chance of breakage. So you're you geared up to battle this big dragon, and you end up probably killing it. Maybe not. When you're really unlucky and you roll a lot of blanks, you might just end up not damaging it enough, and it just knocks you out. But then you won't break your weapon because, all of the blanks don't break your weapon. The higher values, they break your weapon. There's only 1 breakage on each die, so it's a chance of 1 in 6. But if you have this big elaborate weapon, it's probably gonna break something. And you might be unlucky, but you do a lot of damage and just right out kill that dragon, but you have a lot of breakage. So you have to spend some time repairing that weapon again. So sometimes that might get a bit frustration if your rolls are really bad, but it's the same for everyone. So it does balance in that way. So some people might not like that because of the randomness of the dice, but I just like that a lot. I like chucking dice and seeing what happens and then just making the best with that. Okay, so that is Fuji Koro by Game Brewer. It is currently on Kickstarter. I'll put a link in the description below. You can also click the I in the top corner of this video. And so go and check that out. If the things that I told you appeal to you, if you like that, I would definitely recommend backing it on Kickstarter. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.